Hi everyone! So for today's video, I am going to be telling you all about the books that I read in December, aka my December wrap-up. I read 6 books and I pretty much enjoyed all of them, so it was a very good wrap-up to my reading year. The first book that I finished was The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. This is not necessarily a retelling of A Christmas Carol, but we basically follow a girl called Holly Chase, and she is now dead, but when she was alive, she wasn't a very good person, and so she was visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, but afterwards she still didn't change her ways, and so then she died, and now she is the ghost of Christmas past, and she works for this sort of magical corporation in New York City called Project Scrooge, where they basically have a Scrooge every year that they monitor, and they find out the people in their lives who would be that person's Tiny Tim or their Marley and stuff like that, and then they do the whole thing on Christmas Eve where they send the ghosts to try and get them to change their ways. So we're following Holly Chase as she is sort of bitter that she's now stuck in this eternity of being the ghost of Christmas past, and this year the Scrooge is this very hot guy, and so that's where the whole romance comes into play. And yeah, I actually read this book I think 2 years ago. Well, I DNF'd this book 2 years ago. And so for some reason I decided to try and pick it up again for this Christmas, and I basically gave it 5 stars. Funny how things work like that, but I guess I just wasn't in the right mindset when I first read it, because this year I really enjoyed it because I gave it a very high rating. I think I gave it an official rating of 4.5 stars, but I pretty much loved it, and it has been lingering on my mind since I've read it. Loved the story, I loved the characters, I loved the meaning behind it, I just loved it overall. I really don't have many negative things to say about it. The only reason I didn't give it a full 5 stars was because there was a scene or two that I wasn't fully invested in, and also the ending I'm still not sure how I feel about, because I think it had a great ending but it didn't end the way I want to. However, it's actually said in the book, this didn't end the way you wanted it to, you wanted it to end like this, and I was like, holy cow, that is how I wanted it to end, and so that almost made it even better. But yeah, I'm kind of torn. So overall, I really enjoyed this book and would 100% recommend it to anyone to read during the Christmas season. So the next book that I read was A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I had never read this book before, but I've pretty much loved every single adaptation of A Christmas Carol I've ever seen, and so I figured I should probably read the book. I was a little bit nervous going into it because I've heard a lot of scary things about Dickens' writing, because it tends to be a little dense, but I think this book, because the movie with Jim Carrey in it, that film is pretty accurate to the book as far as all the lines and the scenes and everything, and so that definitely made it a lot easier to read. So I ended up giving it 5 stars because it was just a really good book, and maybe I'll read it again next year because it's pretty short as well. I picked up Dashing Lilies Book of Dares by Rachel Cohn and David Levithan. This is the first book in a duology that everyone really enjoyed the first book, but they really didn't like the second book. And I think the first book, it can be read as a standalone, which is what I'm doing because I didn't really like this book very much. I give it 2 stars. It is set in New York City, and we follow these 2 characters, Dash and Lily, and they end up leaving these little notes and dares to each other throughout New York City, and it's like a romance, and I just didn't really like it. I started off really liking it because I liked the whole premise of it and the setting and everything, but then after a while it just got to be a little bit unrealistic, and I also found the characters to be very annoying, so I'm definitely in the minority with this, but I just didn't like this book very much at all. I then did my annual reread of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. You guys know I love this book. I give it 5 out of 5 stars every single time, and I've been trying to read a new edition of it every time that I reread it. So this time around I read it in the Puffin Classics edition. So this has lovely illustrations throughout it. This is probably my least favorite illustration style for Alice in Wonderland. I don't know. I don't like their little dot eyes and mouth and everything, but it was still a really nice read, and I do still like the illustrations, but it's just not my favorite. Then I picked up The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is an adult thriller novel. I'm not really sure how to explain the synopsis of this, but we basically follow a woman who's a journalist, and she goes on this kind of cruise with all these other journalists, and she, in the middle of the night, hears a like scream and a splash, and she goes out onto like the deck and sees blood on the side of the thing, and she insists that the woman in the cabin next to her has been killed and thrown overboard. But when she tries to tell the rest of the crew about this, they insist that there never was a woman in that cabin, and so she is trying to figure out what is going on. I can't remember now. I think I gave it like 3 or 3.5 stars. I did enjoy it, but not as much as I wanted it to. I definitely, for some reason, I love the setting of anything on like a boat or a cruise, and so the setting of this I really enjoyed, but the beginning I liked, the ending I liked, the middle part dragged a little bit for me, and I just found it kind of boring in the middle, so that's why I ended on a 3.5 stars. And like most of the adult thrillers that I've read recently, I just don't like the characters at all, and I never find myself being very invested in the characters in adult thriller novels. I don't know why, but I just don't. The final book that I read in December was The Air Formulas by Britt Nunes. This is a beta copy that was sent to me from the author, and this is a sort of dystopian sci-fi book. It's told in dual perspectives, and I'm not really sure how to explain the plot of this, but basically it's set in the future when Earth has been like severely polluted and there's only like this small population left. Yeah, I'm like really struggling on how to explain the plot of this, so basically it's a like steampunk sci-fi dystopian. That's all you need to know. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I have read and reviewed 3 other books by this author that she had sent me, and this is by far my favorite one. I really liked the characters, I enjoyed the story, I really enjoyed this book. The only thing that kind of lacked for me, which is why I didn't give it a higher rating, was the kind of world building and setting and descriptions. I just found it really hard to picture like what everything looked like, and I also found parts of the story to be a little bit confusing, so that was the only reason I didn't give it a higher rating. But other than that, the characters and the plot I really enjoyed. So those were all of the books that I read in December. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what your favorite read was in December, and yeah, that is all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?